Emma fights to support her son, Max, as they face financial struggle. When Max, a 10-year-old with wide, determined eyes, secretly ventures out to help his mother, the community is moved by his courage. But just as hope emerges through their newfound support, Emma's estranged husband, Sam, reappears, stirring old wounds and unanswered questions. Will Emma protect her fragile stability, or risk it all to give Sam a second chance? A damp chill filled the small kitchen as Emma opened the fridge, scanning its sparse shelves. She sighed, spotting a lone loaf of bread and a half-empty jar of peanut butter. It would have to do. In the room next door, her 10-year-old son, Max, was sound asleep, his cheeks flushed from the night's chill. Emma tiptoed past his door, whispering a silent promise to herself that one day they wouldn't struggle so much. But promises weren't enough for Max. A perceptive boy with a mop of dark, curly hair and a warm, wide smile, he was quick to notice things most kids his age would miss, like the way his mother's hands were sore and red, or how she wore her coat indoors because the heater had broken down. Emma never spoke about her troubles, always careful to tuck them away behind her gentle smile, but Max felt them every day, like little pinpricks of worry that poked at him each time he saw her tired eyes. On the surface, things seemed ordinary. Max was a good student, popular among his friends, and Emma, always polite and hardworking, had managed to keep them afloat despite her demanding hours as a waitress and cleaner. However, this was their first winter without enough heat, and the bills seemed to grow each month. Max could tell something was wrong. He'd catch Emma sitting by the window at night, her head in her hands, and sometimes he even heard her on the phone, pleading with bill collectors. One night, he overheard her whisper, "I don't know how we'll make it." Emma had always been careful to keep her worries hidden, but for Max, these little glimpses were enough. He lay awake, night after night, feeling the weight of his mother's struggles pressing down on his small shoulders. He knew he couldn't do much. He was only a kid after all. But he also knew that doing nothing wasn't an option. That's when he made his decision. If he couldn't change things for her, he'd at least try to help in whatever way he could. So one morning, while Emma was at work, he packed his small backpack with a water bottle and an old sandwich, crept out of their tiny apartment, and made his way into town. He didn't want to worry her, but in his mind, he pictured himself coming home with enough money to lighten her load, to maybe even get their heater fixed. Max arrived at the bustling marketplace, his heart pounding as he took in the early morning crowd. Here, he thought, he could find people who might need a little help, maybe someone who'd pay him a few dollars to carry their groceries or wash their car. He was so sure of his plan that he barely noticed the worried looks from the shopkeepers, who wondered why a young boy was out alone so early. As the hours wore on, he moved from stall to stall, bravely offering his services with a shy smile, earning a few dollars here and there, though not nearly as much as he'd hoped. But Emma, when she returned home that afternoon, found Max's bed empty and his school bag untouched. Panic surged through her as she searched every room, calling his name. She tore through the apartment, hoping against hope that he'd simply wandered off with a friend, but when none of his friends had seen him, she knew something was wrong. Her first instinct was fear. Her boy, the light of her life, had disappeared without a word, and no one seemed to know where he'd gone. It wasn't long before Emma was knocking on doors, clutching her phone as she called the police, her heart racing with dread. Each hour that passed felt like an eternity, the ache in her chest growing as she replayed every moment from the last few days, trying to remember if he'd said anything that might hint at where he'd gone. The officers assured her they'd find him. "Sometimes kids wander off, ma'am," they said gently, but their words did nothing to calm her. She knew Max wouldn't simply wander off. He was too responsible, too sensitive to leave her like that. She clutched her phone all night, waiting for news, hoping he'd just walk through the door, saying he'd gotten lost or been with a friend. At dawn, a shopkeeper near the market recognized Max's face on a missing child flyer posted online. "This boy, he was helping out here yesterday," he murmured to a customer. The woman, alarmed by the mention of a missing child, quickly contacted the authorities. That's when Emma received the call that shattered her relief. They'd found him, but something was wrong. The voice on the other end hesitated before speaking. "Ma'am, your son, he wasn't lost. He was working." As Emma raced toward the market, her heart pounded with fear and confusion. Her mind spun, trying to piece together the fragments of the message she'd just received. Max had been working? What could that possibly mean? She felt a stab of guilt, wondering if he'd somehow understood the strain she tried so hard to hide from him. And yet, the thought of her young son out there, trying to ease her burden, unsettled her even more. The marketplace was a flurry of early morning activity as vendors set up their stall. Emma spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Mr. Ruiz, the fruit seller who'd often given Max an apple or two on their walks home. His expression softened when he saw her, and he walked over, a kind but hesitant look on his face. "I saw him yesterday, Emma," he said quietly, his thick accent filled with sympathy. "Your boy, he was going stall to stall, asking if anyone needed help. Seemed determined, that one." Emma felt her face flush. "Why didn't you tell him to go home?" "I tried, but he looked at me and said, 'I just want to help my mom,'" Mr. Ruiz replied, his voice heavy with regret. "I thought maybe you knew." But Emma hadn't known. She hadn't realized how much Max had been affected by their situation. It struck her like a punch in the chest. Her son, just a child, had taken it upon himself to solve problems that were never his to carry. She felt the sting of helplessness, mixed with a strange sense of awe at his bravery. But this wasn't how things were supposed to be. He was supposed to be at school, with friends, not wandering the market, offering to work for pennies. The next morning, Emma sat down with Max, her emotions a tight knot in her chest. She wanted to be firm, to tell him that he must never do anything like this again. But looking into his big, dark eyes, she saw the determination there, the same determination that had carried her through years of hardship. For a moment, she was speechless. "Why, Max?" she asked finally, keeping her voice as gentle as she could. "Why didn't you tell me?" Max fidgeted, his small hands gripping his pants tightly. "I didn't want you to worry, Mom. You work so hard, and I thought maybe I could help even a little." Emma felt her heart break. She reached over, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Oh, honey, you don't have to do this. You're just a kid. It's my job to take care of you, not the other way around." Max pulled back, his face set with a look far too serious for his age. "But who's taking care of you, Mom?" The question hit her like a cold wind. She'd never thought of it like that, but she had to be strong, for his sake. She forced a smile, even though her heart was heavy. "You take care of me by going to school, by being my happy little boy. That's all I need." But Max's resolve only grew stronger. Each day, he tried to do little things around the house, cleaning, folding clothes, even trying to cook, though most attempts ended in messy, slightly charred meals. He'd never say it aloud, but Emma knew that Max was afraid. Afraid of losing the few comforts they had, of seeing his mother struggle so much. And as much as she wanted to reassure him, their reality was not kind. They were constantly on the edge, and one small misstep could mean disaster. A week later, as they sat down for dinner, plain pasta with a can of tomato sauce stretched thin, Emma noticed that Max was unusually quiet. She watched him push the food around on his plate, his brow furrowed in thought. "What's on your mind, sweetie?" she asked. Max looked up, hesitant. "Mom, do you think things will ever get easier?" She wanted to answer with certainty, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? That everything would be fine when she herself didn't know? She smiled gently, hoping to ease his worry. "Yes, Max. We just have to keep going, day by day." One night, when Emma was working late, Max snuck out again. He was careful this time, sticking to the shadows as he made his way to a nearby neighborhood where he'd heard people sometimes needed help with odd jobs. He knocked on doors, offering to clean yards, wash cars, anything that might earn him a few extra dollars. That's when he met Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman with a warm smile and a gentle voice. She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and concern, asking why he was out so late by himself. Max shrugged, glancing away. "I just wanted to help my mom. She works all the time, and I thought maybe I could make some money so she doesn't have to work so hard." Mrs. Thompson's eyes softened, and she invited him in for a cup of cocoa. They sat together in her small, cozy kitchen as she listened to his story, her heart breaking with every word. Max was just a little boy with big dreams, dreams that he was trying to realize for someone else's sake. She reached out, patting his hand. "You're a brave boy, Max, and your mother's lucky to have you." Later that night, Mrs. Thompson made a phone call. The next day, a social media post circulated, telling the story of a young boy who wandered the neighborhood, hoping to earn money to support his mother. The post, filled with admiration for Max's courage and love for his mother, quickly gained attention. Within hours, messages poured in, people asking how they could help, some offering money, others asking if there were ways to make Emma's life a bit easier. Emma, unaware of it all, carried on with her routine, still struggling, still determined, until one morning when she received a message that took her completely by surprise. The town's local news outlet had picked up the story, and a small group of community members had pooled together some funds to help. They wanted to meet her and Max, to hear their story and to offer their support. Emma was stunned, her emotions a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She couldn't imagine that people, strangers, had taken notice, that they cared enough to lend a hand. That evening, Emma sat Max down, her voice thick with emotion as she tried to explain the incredible turn of events. She told him about Mrs. Thompson, about the people who wanted to help them, about the kindness they'd been shown. Max listened, his face lighting up with hope, though part of him felt shy about accepting the help. "Mom," he said slowly, "does this mean you don't have to work so hard now?" Emma smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe things really are going to get easier." As they hugged, a quiet sense of peace settled over them, a feeling they hadn't known in a long time. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to imagine a future where Max didn't have to worry, where they could live without the constant fear of what tomorrow might bring. The following week, Emma and Max prepared to meet the people who had reached out, though Emma still struggled with mixed feeling. She was grateful, yes, but she'd always prided herself on managing on her own, without needing charity. Yet as she glanced at Max, she knew this wasn't just about her. It was about providing him with a life free from the shadows of their constant struggle. They arrived at the community center, where several families, local business owners, and even a few teachers from Max's school had gathered. As they entered, a warm round of applause greeted them, surprising both Emma and Max. Emma felt a blush rise to her cheeks, and Max gripped her hand tightly, his wide eyes taking in the crowd. He'd never imagined that his quiet acts of determination would attract this much attention. An older man, Mr. Alvarez, stepped forward with a welcoming smile. He was the owner of a small grocery store in town, known for his generosity and commitment to the community. "Emma, Max," he began, his voice filled with warmth, "we heard about the challenges you've been facing. And young man," he nodded toward Max, "we're incredibly moved by your courage and your love for your mom." Emma swallowed, emotion swelling in her chest. It was surreal, hearing a stranger speak of their struggles, their bond, as if he truly understood. She glanced at Max, who looked at her with a small, proud smile. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't expect any of this." Mr. Alvarez's gaze softened. "We all need a little help sometimes, and you two, you deserve a little break." "So," he cleared his throat, motioning to a small table filled with envelopes. "A few of us decided to gather what we could. It's not much, but we hope it'll make things a bit easier." The room filled with applause once more, and Emma could barely contain her tears. She'd spent years hiding her struggles, trying to shoulder every burden alone. But in that moment, she felt a weight lift, replaced by an overwhelming gratitude for the kindness of people who, until now, had been strangers. That evening, as they walked home, Max held the small collection of envelopes close to his chest, his face beaming with excitement. But as they neared their apartment, Emma noticed a dark figure leaning against the doorframe. Her heart skipped a beat, a sense of unease creeping in as she realized who it was, her estranged husband, Sam. Sam had walked out on them years ago, leaving her to raise Max alone. He was a shadow from a past she'd tried hard to forget, a reminder of broken promises and bitter words. She hadn't heard from him in years, not a single call or visit, and she'd hoped that he was gone for good. But now, here he was, his face shadowed under a worn baseball cap, his expression unreadable. "Emma," he said, his voice rough, "I heard you got a little help from the neighborhood." His gaze shifted to Max, his eyes softening slightly. "Hey, Max, you've grown." Emma's protective instincts flared. She stepped in front of Max, shielding him from Sam's gaze. "What are you doing here, Sam?" He looked down, his shoulders slumped, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. "I made mistakes," he said slowly, each word heavy with something that might have been remorse. "I've been trying to make things right with my life, and I wanted to see if maybe we could be a family again." The words hit her like a cold slap. Family? After all this time? She fought the urge to laugh, to tell him that the family he'd left behind had found a way to survive without him. But Max's curious gaze reminded her that, as much as she wanted to protect her son, this was his father standing before them, however flawed he might be. Over the next few days, Sam lingered around, doing little things to show he wanted to make amends. He helped repair the apartment's broken heater, offered to drive Max to school, even brought groceries one afternoon. Max was cautious, but curious, clearly torn between the excitement of having his father around and his loyalty to his mother. Emma, however, kept her guard up. She watched Sam carefully, never letting her defenses drop. She had learned long ago that people didn't change easily, and she wouldn't allow her son to be hurt again. But despite her misgivings, she saw the glimmer of hope in Max's eyes every time Sam showed up. One night, Max asked her outright, "Mom, do you think maybe Dad's changed?" Emma paused, her heart sinking. She wanted to shield him from disappointment, to remind him that Sam had left before and could just as easily leave again. But the hope in Max's voice was too strong, too raw for her to crush. "People can change, Max," she said gently, "but it takes time, and we need to be careful. Just don't get your hopes up too high, all right?" Max nodded, though she could see the sadness in his eyes. Her words had planted a seed of doubt, but his heart still clung to the possibility of a happy ending, the idea of a complete family. A few days later, Sam showed up with a proposition that took them both by surprise. "Look," he said, fidgeting with his hat, "I've saved a little bit, not much, but enough. I thought maybe we could find a bigger place, something more comfortable for Max." Emma's heart hardened. She saw through his words, the promises, the grand gestures. She knew that leaving their struggles behind wasn't as simple as moving to a better apartment. But her silence was broken by Max, who looked at her with pleading eyes. "Mom, maybe we could try?" Emma took a deep breath, torn between her son's wishes and her own hard-won wisdom. She looked at Sam, her gaze unflinching. "Max and I have built a life together, Sam. If you're serious about being part of it, you'll have to earn your place, not with money, but by showing up every single day." Sam nodded, his expression solemn. For the first time, she sensed a sincerity in him, something more than empty promises. And as much as she wanted to protect Max from heartbreak, she knew that he deserved a chance to know his father, even if it came with risks. The next few weeks were a tentative dance, a cautious reunion of sorts. Sam showed up regularly, taking Max to his soccer games, helping with homework, even fixing the leaky faucet that had dripped for months. Emma watched, her guard up, yet allowing a small crack of possibility to seep in. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. But one evening, when Sam was supposed to take Max out for dinner, he didn't show up. Max waited by the door, his face filled with quiet hope that slowly crumbled into disappointment as the hours ticked by. Emma's heart ached as she watched him wait, each minute deepening the silent hurt in his eyes. Late that night, Sam finally called, his voice slurred, a weak apology stumbling through the receiver. Emma's anger flared, a mixture of rage and heartbreak. This was exactly what she'd feared. The same cycle, the same broken promises. She hung up, turning to Max, who sat silently, his face buried in his hands. She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. "It's okay, Max. We're okay. We always have been." And in that moment, Emma realized that their family was complete, just the two of them, bound by a love stronger than disappointment, stronger than empty promises. Sam had been given his chance, but he hadn't been able to change, and she would no longer wait for him to become someone he wasn't. The next morning dawned with a quiet stillness in their small apartment. Emma was up early, preparing breakfast with a determined calm, her movements careful as she placed Max's favorite scrambled eggs on the table. The memory of last night still lingered, heavy as a storm cloud, but she knew today was a new beginning. She wouldn't let disappointment overshadow the love and strength they shared. Max joined her at the table, his eyes tired but his small smile resolute. Emma reached over, gently brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We're going to be okay, Max," she said, her voice steady, filled with a reassurance she finally felt in her bones. Max nodded, and Emma could see that quiet resilience shining in his eyes, a strength that had grown with each challenge they'd faced together. "I know, Mom. It's just us, and I think that's enough." Those words wrapped around her heart, sealing a bond that was unbreakable. They had been through so much, the struggles, the moments of hope and disappointment, and now they stood on the other side, stronger, more sure of themselves and each other. Over the following weeks, life began to settle into a new kind of normal. The community's generosity continued to provide small reliefs, a discounted grocery bill here, a warm meal brought by a neighbor there, and while Emma's workload didn't ease up entirely, the kindness around her lifted a burden she'd grown so used to carrying alone. She even allowed herself to dream of a future that didn't feel so heavy, a life where Max could focus on his studies and friends instead of worrying about their bills. One afternoon, as Emma was cleaning tables at the diner, she received a call from Mr. Alvarez. He had been following their story since the first day, touched by Max's courage and Emma's dedication. "Emma," he said warmly, "I know you've been through a lot. I'm starting up a small training program for people interested in customer service and management. I'd like to invite you to join." Emma felt a surge of gratitude, almost overwhelmed. She had always wanted more for herself and for Max, but had rarely found the time or resources to even consider it. The program would allow her to build new skills, open doors she'd thought forever closed. She accepted, her heart soaring with a hope she hadn't felt in years. In the months that followed, Emma threw herself into the training, balancing her responsibilities with a new sense of purpose. She learned quickly, absorbing every lesson, every piece of advice Mr. Alvarez offered. Max noticed the difference in her, too. He saw her come home with a spark in her eye, a renewed energy that lifted both of them. Eventually, Emma was offered a position at Mr. Alvarez's store, overseeing inventory and helping train new staff. The pay was better, the hours more manageable, and for the first time in years, Emma could see a way forward that didn't feel like a constant uphill battle. She knew she'd still have tough days, but now she had a solid foundation, a path that allowed her to breathe and provide for Max without the constant fear of falling short. And Max, he blossomed, relieved of the weight he'd carried for so long. He returned to being a 10-year-old boy, able to focus on school, soccer, and his friends. He no longer felt the need to slip out to earn money or take on responsibilities far beyond his years. Watching his mother grow stronger, more confident, he realized he didn't need to worry. They were truly okay. One evening, as they sat on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn, Max looked up at his mother, a thought that had been simmering in his mind finally finding its way to his voice. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think Dad will ever come back?" Emma paused, choosing her words carefully. She had thought long and hard about this question, and while the answer was complicated, she wanted to be honest. "I don't know, Max, but what I do know is that you and we're strong enough on our own. We've got each other, and that's enough for me. Is it enough for you?" Max nodded, his face serious, his hand slipping into hers. "Yeah, it is." Emma felt a surge of pride, a fierce love for this boy who had stood beside her through every hardship, every challenge. They were a team, stronger together than apart, and she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side. Months later, as Emma watched Max run across the soccer field, laughing and calling to his friends, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had learned the strength of accepting help, of letting others in, and most of all, of allowing herself to dream again. The kindness of strangers had given her a second chance, but her strength, Her resilience and her love for Max were what had carried them through. Their journey wasn't perfect. They still faced challenges, bills to pay, and long days at work. But now each day felt a little lighter, each hardship a little less daunting. They had discovered a life beyond survival, a life where hope didn't feel so out of reach. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to HeroKind Stories and share this video with those who need a little reminder of the strength we all carry within us. And if you enjoyed this, we've got another incredible story for you. Click on the video appearing now to discover another tale of hope and resilience that you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching, and remember, kindness changes lives.